Chapter 6. L. Ron Hubbard, Death's Deputy. Of Cripples. At dusk, Clay aimlessly stirred the gravel with his cane, not seeing the patterns he made. As a soldier, he was injured to death, and wise in the fact that the sooner a man casts death from his possibilities, the more healthy is that man. Sympathy was the luxury of a civilian where agony was concerned. And so with an effort he had put the professor out of his mind, but the blankness resulting was not filled with those fatal words to the effect that he would never fly again. No envy did he cast upon the soaring pigeons this day. He thought not at all. His life had stopped, and his whole being stood still. Would she come by today? At first he had watched every face anxiously, but that was 8 hours ago. He had been on the alert for every footstep, but she had not come. Luncheon was forgotten, even though he had left his breakfast untouched. The shadows of the day had grown longer and longer. A little whisper of cold wind from the lake played with a newspaper. The pigeons had grown few, and finally were gone, all of them, to their cotes. And still she did not come. Suddenly he came out of himself with a shiver. His leg hurt, and the wind bit through his blouse and got at his soul. She wouldn't come. He would never see her again, to glimpse the one thing in this world which could bring him rest, and then to find that it was never to be glimpsed again. He made an angry swirl with his cane. What a fool he was! He had let down the bars. For a few hours he had let life run itself, and it had not worked. He had wanted rest, but he knew now he would never find it. Rest was death. With his cane helping, he got up from the bench. The lights had come on now, and the park was deserted. People were in their homes, letting the day die peacefully. The wind twisted at his cap and whined in his ears. Slowly he began to walk up the path. A hand timidly touched his shoulder. It might as well have been a bullet, the way it whirled him around. He staggered and caught himself with the cane. The street lamp reached but dimly here, not helped by the tendrils of mist which drift along the path. Her face seemed but an illusion, fragile and lovely. Her lips were parted a trifle, and she was breathing quickly, frightened at her own temerity. She could not see his face against the soft light, only the fine outline of his head. Clay's heart rose up to hammer in his throat. Awkwardly he took off his cap, finding nothing to say, indeed daring to say nothing lest he again send her away. She seemed to know that he had been waiting for her, but she did not dare take it for granted. Yesterday, he faltered at last, I was a little unkind. I've waited, hoping you'd come back, and I could ask you to forgive me. Just to ask my forgiveness? That and, well, do you forgive me? I came back, she said simply. One by one the barriers were falling away between them, and he was grateful to her for the little while that she did not speak. A naval officer drifted by, a shadow in the mist. His good-natured and knowing grin brought them even closer together. I came to ask you to dinner, she said swiftly. Please, please, please don't say anything. You must come, and you can't, you say you won't, for then, she laughed a little, I'd be terribly embarrassed. As a gentleman, I could not well refuse on those grounds. She took his arm, and they went down the path in silence, aware of a bond between them which needed no strengthening talk. Clay utterly forgot himself once he had burst out of the dark clouds into a sunrise. He felt as light-headed and unreasoningly gay now. After a little he began to talk, easily and naturally, as though this was a conversation they had left off but a few hours before, and were unaware of any break. Too soon for them both, they came to the grim old house. I couldn't come sooner today, said Laura, because my mother isn't well. Perhaps we better not. Oh, yes, but we must be very quiet. The mice don't even dare tiptoe here. And at this further protest added, the doctor gives her very heavy sleeping draughts. There is no slightest chance that she will hear or know if we are quiet. Like two burglars they came into the hall, and she hung his cap upon the massive rack. Clay was glad of a chance to watch her unobserved, and was slightly annoyed with the cap for not falling down more than twice. With exaggerated seriousness, she held her finger to her lips and guided him silently into the parlor. "Be careful of that sofa," she whispered. "It's just waiting to stab someone." He sat upon it gingerly. From the marble-top table she brought an album. "I've been waiting to show this to someone for years and years. It's that incredible." She opened it up to George, age 2, and with further admonitions about being quiet, floated away to give the serving of the dinner her last attention. For some little time he could hear her stirring about and giving excited and contradictory orders to the maid, and then at length she came to the parlor door, warm with her business and half frightened that things wouldn't go right after all. He stood for a moment, looking at the table with admiration. The cloth was creamy white, sparkling with crystal and silver. 2 candles in their sticks showered a kindly glow over everything. She let him seat her, and for that he was grateful. The soup finished, a small roast was placed before him to carve, and again he was grateful. But though the food was delicious, he hardly tasted it, so wondering was he at both the girl's exquisite beauty and his own strange giddiness of mind. At last they sat quietly, warming their brandy with their hands, just looking at each other, afraid to break into this comfortable silence. The dinner had gone well, and she could relax now and forget about those 100 scattered details. She thought she had never known a more satisfying moment. His pilot wings gleamed dully. His collar had been loosened a trifle, and a lock of his hair curled down over his forehead. Happiness suffused his being and gave him grace, and his uniform gave him mystery. "You must have been very lonely here," he said, sensing it. "Tonight I am not thinking about loneliness." But she told him how it had been, about her father, whom her mother would not let die, about her mother and the grand dame she had once been to society. She told him about a brother who had been lost as a baby, and how her mother had raised him in memory. Sipping his brandy, he thought about this home of illusion and how it contrasted with his own violent definiteness of life. And soon she knew of attempts to fly in kits and the hand-to-gas tank existence of barnstorming, of the cool, clean skies, and the chivalry of the casual gentleman of the sky. Watching the smoke come straightly up from his cigarette, she followed his words with her imagination, filling in the gaps as she could, thrilled by the things he said, but more by the tones in his voice. The candles were burning low in their sockets, and their hands had wandered across the table to touch, and the golden moments were drawing to an end. Abruptly the door crashed open. Glowering at them stood the old woman, her face evil with suspicion and contempt. Clay came to his feet and limped a few steps beside the table. There was nothing said for seconds, and the silence grew thick, and then, faltering, Laura looked from Clay to her mother. "May I introduce Flight Lieutenant?" The old woman glared at the cigarette smoke which spiraled up from his saucer, for it was this which had called her downstairs for the first time in years. "Your father," said Miss Grant heavily, "had his opinion of men who smoked." She glared triumphantly at Laura. "I was wondering how you spent your nights, how you used your home. Tonight," she added cunningly, "I omitted the sleeping tablets, and I was right." "I am sorry," said Clay. Your daughter—" "Can answer for this herself. A stranger, a man whose name she doesn't even know, a soldier," with heavy contempt. Clay edged toward the door, hoping to save the girl that much. The old woman's voice rose in cruel glee. "A stranger, a soldier, and a cripple." His face was very hard and pale. Mechanically he bowed toward Laura, and then, stiff as his cane, made his way to the front door, took down his cap. Laura was beside him, looking pleadingly up at him. "A cripple!" cried the old woman behind him. Clay opened the door and stepped out into the chilly night. When he had closed it behind him, he could hear Laura sobbing. Leaning very heavily upon his cane, he slowly made his way along the deserted walk. Chapter 7. Of Samaritans. Before he had gone 2 blocks, the wind had cut through him. Little by little, he found it more difficult to walk, for his leg was most affected by the cold. He felt more tired than ever before in his life, and with each new step he slowed. Ahead of him stretched an infinity of dark houses, and he visualized his room as lying half around the world. Only stubbornness kept him going, and finally even that evaporated. It occurred to him that, although he had not seen a taxi, sooner or later one might cruise past. In that case, there was little use in going on. His small store of cash did not make allowances for such things except in extreme necessity. Wearily, he sagged down upon the steps of a house, protected by a stone column from the knife of the wind. For some little while he stayed motionless, glad of the inaction, and then, gradually, with the return of strength, he began to revile himself for being in such a rotten condition. Next he would be using a wheelchair. His anger flickered and began to glow while he fanned it with the memory after memory. Life had found him wanting, and little by little life was discarding him. Why not take him altogether and have done with this slow torture? Why maul him cat-like and enjoy his misery? To place upon his road a woman like Laura and then snatch her away, that was the pattern which life had gleefully decided to follow. If he could only do something about his leg. A town car came to a silent stop at the curb, and out of it stepped a top-hatted gentleman who turned back to carefully aid and an ermined young lady to the walk. "I shan't need you until 10 tomorrow," said the man. The car drew away, and the man escorted the woman up the steps. They had almost reached the top before they saw Clay. "Hello?" said the man, catching a glint of wings by the street lamp. "I'm sorry," said Clay resentfully, struggling to his feet. "I was waiting." "Oh, that's a damn shame," said the man. "Why didn't you ring? Miss Gregory would have let you in, unless she's gone to sleep in some corner or other. Open the door, sweet, while I help the gentleman into the hall." Clay evaded the aid. "You don't understand." "Of course, my dear fellow, but can't we talk about it where it's warm? I say you're blue with this wind. A good night for a topcoat, eh?" "You are under a misapprehension," said Clay. "I did not—" He caught his breath under an onslaught of pain, and during the next few seconds he was too weak to fend off the other. When the red haze cleared, he finally found they were in an office, tastefully furnished, but glaring white in places. Clay fixed his glance upon an instrument case. I understand," said Clay. "You're a physician." "Dr. Evanston at your service," said the man, shedding his coat. He was, Clay saw, a young man of great vitality, and to find a doctor with such equipment so early in a career must mean— "I confess I forgot all about the appointment. The concert was superb, and the encores made it last an extra half hour. But now that I'm here, I trust you'll forgive me." "Appointment?" said Clay. "But I—" "Certainly. Flight Lieutenant McLean, isn't it? For 10:30 tonight, yes. I distinctly recall Miss Gregory accepting it." A tall, efficient-looking nurse entered at that moment, and the doctor looked to her for confirmation. She smiled professionally at Clay. "Now, old fellow," said the doctor, "let's get down to it. It's your leg, I believe you said. Tissues in the knee joint all shot to the devil and so forth, and you wouldn't mind my experimenting with the hormones, amino acids, and so forth. Delighted at such faith." "But I—" began Clay.
"Here, pull up your pants leg, there, like a good fellow. Ah, now."
And Evanston, shedding his tailcoat, stopped in the middle of the act to regard the knee. He finished what he was doing and then began to make a thorough examination of the wound.
"Frightful job of surgery," said Evanston. "No chance for the tissues to get back. Wonder they didn't use carpet tacks, eh?"
He went over to his instrument case and stood there for a long time, looking at his reflection in the glass and thinking. Finally he came back. not having gotten anything out.
"Lieutenant,"
said Dr. Evanston,
"it's easy to see why you've been through hell with that leg. It's never really healed, underneath, you understand. If the joint, to be plain, has not prematurely hardened, we may be able to do something about it. Of course, so far I've only used this treatment on animals, but if you care to take a chance with me, I assure you—"
"You think something can be done?" said Clay wildly.
"Why, it's an even chance. It might come out better or it might be worse. I make no promises."
Clay recovered a little and refused hope. "The cost, Doctor?"
"I'll charge nothing for my services. Your worries on that score can be settled where and now. All it will amount to will be your hospital and the nurse."
"And that?"
"About $200, I should say."
"Two. Dr. Evanston, I have less than 50 and no way to get more."
"Well, then, a charity ward?"
"Charity? Again?" Clay rolled down his pants leg and braced himself up out of the chair. "No, we can dispense with charity."
"Good. Then may I see you tomorrow, say about 11? My offices are on Park Avenue. A card, Miss Gregory. There, old fellow. At 11, then."
Clay shook his head and somehow got out of the place. He didn't dare trust his voice until there was some distance down the walk, and then, characteristically, he swore. It was all too amazing. Who could have made that appointment? Not Laura, for she had not known his name, and he had not even known hers except through that album. If he could only walk like a man again. But $200. The wheel whirred, a montage of numbers. The little wooden ball teased the pockets, sliding down from the bank and leaping in, only to spring instantly out and go all around once more. It was, had Clay noted with disgust, a wheel with both 0 and 00. Americans were the only people who would play against these odds. The additional green 00 changing the house take from 1 in 35 to 1 in 17.5. But Clay, in his present mood, was not asking for odds. Once more he was crossing swords with his fate, and his determination not to be beaten made him feel strong enough to direct that ball just by looking at it. Around it went. Clay's $5 bill was crumpled up on red. With a hollow clatter, the ball leaped all the way across the wheel into black, rebounded into another black, and then eased into red. The greasy-faced croupier paid the bets with swiftness, pausing sourly only when he came to the 5 on red. "Let it ride," muttered Clay. The croupier scowled at the wheel as though handing it orders. He spun the disc and flipped in the ball. The grind of it ate up the babble about the table. Noisily the sphere cracked down upon a red number and stayed there. Again the croupier paid the bets. Again he scowled at the $10 on red before he paid it. Tonight the crowd was mostly cheap, and the 10 which he must add would make, if it continued, a bad spot in his till. The wheel whirred into life. The bets pattered down, 20 riding red, half the rest of the crowd upon black. Clay only gave a passing glance to the wheel, knowing somehow that he had bullied it into giving him what he wanted. Red again. Viciously, the croupier threw 20 on top of Clay's 20, morose instantly when he collected less than 5 from black. Around and around went the little ball. Red. Let it ride. Red. Let it ride. The croupier's hands were shaking as he increased Clay's pile to $320. Although excited gamblers were beginning to crowd around the board, laying bets on this unusual occurrence, their siding with and against Clay balanced so that the game was losing exactly what had been paid out, and Clay, with a slight smile, counted 300 out and let his 20 stay where it was, according to the croupier's lights, robbing the game of exactly 300, if his sheet was to look like anything this night. The manager came waddling over. For a moment he stood whispering to the croupier, and then, benignly smiling, at one and all, signaled for the game to go on. A hulking brute of a man, muttered angrily next to Clay. Around went the wheel. In the opposite direction sped the ball. Black. The huge fellow next to Clay roared out, "To hell with you and your wired wheels. Put a wooden back in there, or I'll tear this place apart." And he snatched back the bet he had lost on red. Take your money and clear out of here, snarled the croupier.
Not till I've got what I would have won.
You know very little, said the croupier, his anger at Clay transferring to the hulking fellow. Leave this game or I'll have you thrown out.
You won't pay me my rightful win?
No, shouted the croupier. Bill!
To hell with that,
bellowed the big fellow. He lunged as he spoke, seizing the croupier by the throat and smashing his jaw with a fist as hard as a sledgehammer. Screaming with pain, the croupier skidded along the floor, blood spurting from his shattered face. He brought up against the next table, and while the big fellow still roared in triumph, the thud of a shot struck through the room. A coil of smoke eddied up from the croupier's hand. The big fellow's fingers closed about his own throat. With amazed eyes he looked at the gun, and then, spewing blood, slithered down, head first, to writhe and stiffen upon the floor. Clay's fingers were closed so tightly about the roll that the top bill ripped across unnoticed. The silence of the place broke into a panic of sound. Backing, slowing, a question beginning to take form in his mind, Clay got through the door and out. Despite the excitement of the rush, no man struck against him on the stairs. Then, defiantly, refusing to think, Clay was on the street.